Well, we're engaged in this collective computational exercise, which the market, the free market, best optimizes. And then if you have a incorruptible source of the free market endeavor, right? It can't be gerrymandered in any way. Then you hypothetically set up a situation so the least amount of interference with that computational process is possible. Right? You're not putting noise into the system.
Maximal signal, minimal noise.
Yes, exactly. Because you want, so you think, okay, here comes the horizon of the future. Oh no, how are we going to compute it? Well, we're each going to make decisions of value, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. And then the whole economy can adjust itself as people make these tiny, small-scale, multitudinous decisions. It keeps the whole thing alive and functioning. That only works if there isn't noise being introduced into the system. And so one of the things Bitcoin theorists push forward is the notion that you can't add additional noise to this computational mechanism. And that might be right. This is one of the things that really made me interested in Bitcoin. It's like, oh, okay, no interference with, if the free market is a computational device, and if it's the device that enables us to adapt to the horizon of the future, if that follows, it's this micro experimentation, at every front simultaneously with micro failures occurring at the same time. You don't want noise that's not related to the actual environment introduced into that. And hypothetically, that's what fiat inflation, for example, does. That's distortion of the market. There probably isn't any difference between being able to store value for the future and being able to trade with other people without distortion, because the trade is a form of storage for the future. And so it's just an extension of that, right? Because partly what you do to store value for the future is you distribute it into other people. I'm no economist, and I'm certainly no Bitcoin expert, but I've read already that countries that attempted to clamp down hard on Bitcoin saw a depreciation in their own currency's value on currency trading markets because the market read that as insufficient faith in the validity of their own currency. And that's pretty damn interesting. I think it's true. Even if Bitcoin becomes nothing other than that kind of corrective, that wouldn't be nothing. That would be quite something. So I don't see any logical flaws in that formulation. Bitcoin is a radical social experiment, and do you worry, Bitcoiners in general, do you worry that by replacing a fiat currency, or the fiat currency, or any fiat currency maybe, ultimately, are we going to destabilize things that fiat currencies are doing that we don't understand? Like how much utility is there? Is there utility in allowing your government, assuming it's regulated by vote and it's a free society, is there utility in allowing the government to make fundamental financial decisions that Bitcoin would threaten, in a negative way? And like I said, I'm not an economist, and I know there are arguments about why that won't be the case, but arguments in reality aren't the same thing. Would we produce a more sustainable society if we had a less corruptible store of long-term value? I can't see how we couldn't. We'd extend our time frame out to some degree, right? Because now the currency is unstable, and that's factored into all the economic decisions that we make. And if we stabilize the currency so it didn't vary as much over the time frames that we can compute, I suspect that would make us more future-oriented. What'll happen is that Bitcoin will roll itself out incrementally, within the confines of the free market system as it currently exists, and we'll be able to test these prognostications one by one without any revolutionary catastrophes, and we'll be able to find out. You store value in your reputation, and that means you store value in the ethics of your behavior. The Bitcoin notion, I suppose, in some sense, is you have an unerring marker for that now.
Money's kind of the technological implementation of that. Like, we've been looking for the most certain asset to store economic value in. That's effectively what gold was. It had the most predictable supply across time, couldn't be destroyed very easily, so it was fairly indestructible, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as Bitcoiners, that's what we think Bitcoin has perfected. We've created a money that's composed of perfect information. Right? We know it has 21 million, we know exactly what its issuance is. There's nothing hidden in Bitcoin. And that is its value. It's just absolute transparency with no deception, no falsehood. And we touched on the Philosopher's Stone a little bit, but one of the ways that it was defined was, we've been pursuing this for thousands of years to instantiate the principles of Christ in matter or in an abstract concept or an ideal.
Well, it is a system of value.
Yes.
And so that analogy has to be appropriate at some level. I mean, we've already wandered through the notion that there's a tight relationship between your ethics and your reputation, and a tight relationship between your reputation and the storage of value. And that's really worth thinking through. And you have to decide for yourself, I think, whether or not you believe it's true. As an ethical actor, are you most protected against the vagaries of existence by being an ethical actor? I would say that actually, in some profound sense, defines what it means to be an ethical actor. Why would we consider something that didn't have that characteristic ethical? We'd just die if that was the case. That would be so counterproductive. I think what we regard as ethical in the highest sense is that which enables us to store value across the longest period of time. I mean, how could it be otherwise? And so that means that if you believe that, that will change your life, because you start taking what you do a lot more seriously if you believe that. And so is there a necessary interplay between the ethic, like the religious ethic, and the monetary system? What does it say on the dollar bill? Isn't it in God we trust?
Yeah, but the actuality is in Fed we trust.
Yeah, well, so it's corrupted,
Yeah.
and you Bitcoin purists might be right about your presuppositions. Well, we've wandered through a fair bit of conceptual territory today. I don't see any obvious manner in which the presuppositions of the Bitcoin community violate fundamental psychological principles. Quite the contrary. But, like I said, I'm not an economist, that's for sure, and there's lots of things I don't know, so I'd hesitate to give it my unwarranted stamp of approval, for whatever that's worth. But it's an extremely interesting experiment, and I find it quite compelling, the idea of a incorruptible storehouse of value.
There's another really interesting aspect to this that I don't know how much you've looked into, but like the work of John Vallis, who you met earlier, he really explores the personal transformations in the lives of Bitcoiners, and it's leading, myself included, has led me back to traditional values, right? Led me back to Christianity. It's changed my lifestyle in a lot of ways. It changes your diet, changes...
Why do you think that is?
I think it's something to do with time preference. Like just this idea of being able to store your energy in something that's incorruptible and predictable
that you can have
broadens your time horizons.
Yeah.
Philosopher's Stone, where you describe this, to create a technological development in the Philosopher's Stone required a moral development. There was like this co-creative process.
Yeah.
So I've found it very interesting to see that happen in the lives of Bitcoiners, and it's...
Yeah, well, it does, and the time preference issue does make sense, because it's certainly the case that I believe that morality emerges out of iterated voluntary games. So what we regard as moral is the principle that most aptly governs the longest term iterated games.
Right.
And that's something like the sustainability that that people are struggling to attain.
Right.
And I think we have moral intuitions that indicate to us when that is being manifested in people's behavior.
Yeah.
That we find them reliable and trustworthy.
Right.
We find them ethical. And I do think that's associated with a longer time horizon. Maturity, certainly, there's almost no difference between maturity and a longer time horizon. Right. They're almost identical in some sense. And so it could be that Bitcoin, by increasing your faith in the future, does disincline you to fiddle while Rome burns. Right. Could be. I think the danger to the Bitcoin community, and this will probably happen sooner rather than later, is that you'll get clamped down on hard. And that strikes me as highly probable. I think the way that's likely to happen is that the governments will try to implement their own digital currencies, and then do everything they can to squash out competitors. And you think fiat currency is bad, you wait till it's fiat currency with a digital spin, and wait until people can track all of your purchases and decide using some scheme of fiat when you're acting unethically with regards to your choice of, let's say, consumer item.
Right.
Do you really need that automobile? That'll be the next question, you know, coming out down the pipes in the next 10 years. What makes you think you should have an automobile when the whole planet is at stake?
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, who made you final arbiter of value?
Right.
Yeah.